Hey everyone, Synth here and welcome to the attic, where today we're yet again talking about something brand new. Now before we start doing that, I need to thank two people or two parties. I need to thank Databroth and Dawesome for providing me with a key for Myth. That's the synth we're talking about today. They didn't ask me to make a video about it, but I feel it's an interesting enough product to actually have a little chat about it, what it does and what you can expect from it. Now, there's already a lot of synthesizers out there. We have a lot of additive stuff, a lot of subtractive stuff, some FM stuff. We have synthesizers that are very versatile and colorful, like Pigments for instance. We have synthesizers that try to emulate the feeling of working with Microsoft Excel. So that would be Falcon. Powerful, but kind of boring. And then there's also batshit crazy stuff where you can just do whatever you feel like. Let's say Faceplant in this category. Now, when we're talking about Myth, it's actually trying to do some things that I haven't seen before in this way. Myth relies heavily on resynthesis, which means you can drag in samples which gets processed and it turns into a synthesis thing which you can then manipulate, which is a very interesting concept. So without further ado, let's do a cool transition sound thing and let's head into the DAW.
So here we are in Myth, and just to get started we are going to completely ignore Iris for now, because that's the main attraction and we save that for last. So if you initialize a patch in Myth, you have the main ADSR to the right, where you can set your ADSR curve. So for now I've set it to a nice short little plunky sound. And we can move through the structure of the synthesizer. So you have two Iris engines. Every Iris engine is coupled to a oscillator section. So Iris 1 is coupled to oscillator 1. And here you can add several effects, utilities and modulation thingies. You can also add waveforms if you want to. So for instance, this is a saw. So now I have a saw added, and I can also move it up and down an octave or two. And the fun thing is you of course get some unison with unison detune and spread. And these settings go pretty big. Pretty nasty. Sounds pretty good. From the oscillators, the signal gets summed into the filter. Once again, you have a couple of filter options. Also important to know that you also have filter options in your oscillator, so you can actually put filters per synth engine or over the entire effect. And they also included some distortion options here and some effect options. And from the filter, the signal splits into the effects, where you have two parallel effects lanes. So this is something that's actually kind of interesting to talk about, because it's a parallel effects lane with some little tricks. So just to demonstrate, we're going to put a delay on this end. We're going to put a, let's say, reverb on the other end. If you play something, actually let's make this wet. It's a parallel effects lane. It's not that special, although it is important to note that this effects lane is actually per voice, which is pretty neat once you start to do some tricky things. But for now, let's focus on just one effects lane, because I want to show you a little trick in here. So one thing you can actually do is you can use the route block, and if you use the route block, you are actually outputting the signal out from the effects lane into the output of the synth. And you're also grabbing a fresh copy of the input to forward. So what happens here is we have a 100% wet delay. Let's disable this. So when I press a note, and keep an eye down here to see the note press, you can see there's a bit of a delay between the press and the note. If I activate the route, you hear the route signal and then the delay. And you can actually stack this once more. If you feel like it, let's do a pretty long one. Fully wet. So this sounds like this. And if you put a route behind that, let's disable our feedbacks. So this enables you to do a little bit more parallelization within the effects lanes, which is pretty interesting. This allows you to actually do like 4 effects in parallel in a sense. It's pretty cool. It gives a bit more control and it allows you to do some weird things. You also have a effects send and a wet dry control. These are modulatable, so you can actually modulate the effects send per voice, which is quite nice. Aside from these things, you also get some options for modulation, of course, LFO, ADSR, quite a wide selection of MIDI related things, key tracking and a MAV. And this is probably where I want to show you a little trick with the MAV as well. So the one thing that MIF lacks is a sample and hold kind of functionality. It just doesn't have that. So the trick you can actually do here is you can take a MAV and you can just turn it all the way down. You can see here the modulation output becomes 0. And you can insert a node random here. If you enable node random every time you press the key, it will generate a random value. So it now generates a value of here. As you can see, it's different values every time. You can actually play a little bit more with this by making a second MAV. And if you set this to a square, so let's just do it like this. You take this MAV as an input. Now you get a random 1 or 0, which can be useful in some cases. You can also make this a way more complex shape. That's just to give you a little trick to play around with. Modulation itself is very easy. You can just create a modulator, click any parameter, and it will show here which parameter is selected. So nothing is selected right now. If I click a parameter, it will say selected parameter is the rate. And this sets how much the modulation is done. And you can do this with any control if you want to add some modulation. You can. So now these things will modulate. They're cool. The LFOs are also bipolar or not, and they can also be set to poly, and a retrigger can be turned on and off. Same goes for loops. You can have them free running, you can have them looping or not. Change the length to pretty long, and you can set them to be sync or set to BPM. I think we've talked enough about everything but the selling point of the synthesizer, so let's get into the Iris part. Now, by default, you basically get the sine wave. And this is where I'm going to need a bit of sustain. There we go. Now the bottom row, let's start there. These are some sound modulators. So here you have a make it more saw-like. Make it more string-like. More brass-like. More square-like. More synth-like. Noise. And sine, which obviously doesn't do a whole lot because it's already a sine. The interesting thing with Iris, though, because this is fun of course, is that you can actually import samples into this player, and that will make Myth generate that sound using its internal engine. So I actually have a little sample here, which I'm going to drag in. They recommend using C3. So we have a little sample here, which I'm going to drag in. It will resynthesize. There we go. This is the sample. Now, if I play it, it doesn't seem to do a whole lot. And that is because right now it's not actually playing the sample, it's just playing a single frame in the sample. So much like a wavetable synth, you actually need to animate that frame so you actually get full sound. Pretty easy, just right click it, create and use new LFO. And will automatically make a ramp LFO, and it will set the length to be roughly the length of your imported sample, which is pretty nice. Saves a lot of guessing. Now if I actually play this. We get a little sample sound. And the actual sample sounds like this. So as you can hear, it's fairly close. Now that we have this, we can start to play with the top row and the bottom rows to mutate this sample. So let me once again loop it. You can actually see the different colors in here corresponding with these colors to kind of give you an idea of the characteristics. And once you start to play with those colors, you will also see that represented in this view, which is quite nice. It also helps you kind of identify what is going on with the sound. It's very cool. Now the top row, here you have the playback. So you can see that once it plays, this will animate. And after this you get some interesting modulations. So let's go through these. And these actually work together quite nicely. Now this next modulator is kind of important to talk about. Basically every Iris sound is made up out of four sounds, 4 bins of sounds, and with this control you can slide through those bins. So this is one bin, this is a bin, and there are some in between steps. With the loss control, you can blend layers together for a more smooth sound. And that's your sound shaping with the iris engine. The cool thing here is you get 2 of these irises and you have actually 2 modes. You can either fade between these two, or you can do ring modulation. Ring modulating with the same sound is kind of pointless. Once you start to mess around with it, it becomes pretty cool. You can of course load in an entirely different sound into this engine as well if you want to. You can copy between them, and that's pretty cool. One more thing to talk about is this little button right here. So let's say you have added some random stuff to these engines. Okay, now let's do a little bit of delay. Cool. Now let's play a note. Here we go. We can now drag from here. And that note we just played will be imported into the iris engine. So once again, right click, create and use new LFO. Can actually do that again. So now we have this sound. Cool, let's add some more weirdness to it. Let's do some thick chorus. And let's do a bit of gain to boost it up a little again. Drag it from here, drop it into the engine. Of course, we need to animate it again. That's pretty fun. So that gives you some interesting options to do resynthesis and mess around with sounds on a new level. Aside from these modulators on this side, you also have a few fixed modulators from the left side for your velocity mod wheel, C11, and some macros. Aside from all these things, you also get some randomization and some options to freeze parameters so they don't get randomized. And that's basically MIF in a functional way. So let's end it here for this video. Then in the next video we will make some sounds using MIF to see the kind of range we get from MIF. So yeah, see ya in the next video.